The camera pans slowly across a weathered photograph, yellowed with age and framed in ornate silver. It shows a Victorian wedding party posed formally outside an elegant country manor house. 12 people stand in rigid formation, their faces solemn as was customary for photographs of the era. Ladies in corseted dresses with bustles, gentlemen in formal morning coats with cravats, the epitome of late Victorian propriety. The bride's white dress gleams against the darker attire of the others. The photograph bears the subtle sepia tint characteristic of early photography, lending it an air of nostalgic mystery. A soft, measured voice begins to narrate. Elmwood Manor, September 17, 1892. A day that was meant to celebrate the union of two prominent families, the industrious Harringtons and the aristocratic Montgomerys. A day that would instead be remembered for something far more troubling. A day when the absence of a single chair would reveal secrets that had been carefully buried for years. A day when the truth would finally emerge from behind a veil of calculated deception. The camera zooms in on the bride's face. Though her expression appears appropriately solemn for a Victorian photograph, there's something in her eyes. A steely determination that seems at odds with bridal bliss. Her gloved hands clutch a bouquet of white roses and orange blossoms, the traditional flowers of Victorian brides, symbolizing purity and fertility. Yet there's tension in her fingers, a slight tightening around the stems that suggests inner turmoil beneath the composed exterior. Eleanor Harrington was not what many would consider a typical bride of her era, the narrator continues. At 22, she was already known throughout the county for her intelligence and keen observational skills, qualities that were often overlooked in young women of her station. She was a devoted reader of not just poetry and novels, but also science journals and philosophical treatises borrowed from her father's extensive library. On this day, these qualities would serve her in ways no one could have anticipated. The camera zooms in on the photograph, focusing on individual faces, lingering just long enough to make viewers wonder what secrets might lie behind those stern expressions. We see the bride, Eleanor Harrington, her new husband, Thomas Montgomery, looking smugly confident, Eleanor's concerned parents, William and Margaret Harrington, Thomas's calculating father, George Montgomery, and his anxious mother, Victoria. One by one, we examine the faces of the other guests. Eleanor's protective cousin, Sarah, Thomas's shifty brother, Robert, the distinguished Senator Jenkins with his white whiskers, the kindly family physician, Dr. Collins, with his medical bag never far from reach and slightly separated from the others, a handsome young man with searching eyes, James Edwards, whose presence seems somehow out of place. 12 people, the narrator emphasizes. 12 individuals connected by blood, marriage, business, or society, each with their own motivations, their own understanding of what this union meant, each unaware that within hours everything would change, that before the wedding breakfast could be served, masks would slip, truths would emerge, and one chair, conspicuous in its absence, would speak volumes about what was to come. The Harrington and Montgomery families had planned the wedding for months. Everything was arranged with precision. The flowers, the music, the seating, especially the seating. The scene transitions to a recreation of Elmwood Manor's grand dining hall. Sunlight streams through tall windows, illuminating an elegant table set for a wedding reception. Crystal glasses catch the light. Fine china gleams with hand-painted gold trim, and polished silver reflects the flickering of beeswax candles in ornate silver candelabras. The white damask tablecloth is crisp and immaculate, having been pressed with heated irons by the housemaids at dawn. A centerpiece of white roses, lilies, and trailing ivy stretches down the center of the table, its arrangement a testament to the gardener's artistic skill. But there's something not quite right about this perfect tableau. 12 guests were invited to the intimate reception following the ceremony. Only 11 chairs were set at the table. The camera slowly circles the table, showing the careful arrangement of place settings. We count them one by one. 1, 2, 3, until we reach 11. Then the camera completes its circle, emphasizing the absence of a 12th chair. The gap in the otherwise perfect symmetry stands out like a missing tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. A deliberate void in the carefully orchestrated scene. Was it simply an oversight? A servant's mistake? Or was it deliberate? What nobody knew that morning was that by nightfall, one of the guests would no longer require a seat at any table, and Eleanor Harrington had already anticipated exactly who that would be. The scene shifts to early morning at Elmwood Manor. The grand Victorian estate stands proudly against the backdrop of the rising sun, its red brick facade and ornate turrets casting long shadows across manicured lawns. The estate encompasses nearly 200 acres of prime English countryside, with formal gardens, a small lake, and woodlands that have been in the Harrington family for 3 generations. The manor itself is relatively new, built 40 years earlier when William Harrington's father made his fortune in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. Its architecture combines traditional Tudor elements with Victorian grandeur, a physical embodiment of the family's position between old and new money. Horse-drawn carriages arrive periodically, delivering early preparations for the day's events. A delivery wagon from the local florist brings additional roses and lilies for the chapel and reception room. Another cart arrives with cases of champagne from London, carefully packed in straw to prevent breakage during transport. Footmen in Harrington livery, forest green with gold trim, unload these precious items, while gardeners clip the last of the roses for the bridal bouquet. The stable boys lead freshly groomed carriage horses to water, their coats brushed to a high sheen for the important day. In the servants' quarters, a flurry of activity has already been underway for hours. The kitchen staff rose at 4 in the morning to begin preparations for the wedding breakfast and reception. Fires have been lit in all the main rooms to ward off the September chill. Maids have dusted every surface, polished every piece of silver, and arranged fresh flowers in each guest bedroom. The household runs with the precision of a well-maintained timepiece, each servant knowing their exact role in maintaining the Harrington standard of excellence. In the kitchen, Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper, oversees the preparations with military precision. She is a formidable woman in her 50s who has served the Harrington family for over 20 years. Her crisp black dress and starched white apron are immaculate, her bunch of household keys jingling at her waist, symbols of her authority over the domestic realm. Nothing escapes her notice, from a smudged glass to a footman's unpolished buttons. Steam rises from copper pots as the cook, Mrs. Simmons, prepares the wedding breakfast. The menu has been carefully planned to impress without seeming ostentatious. Poached salmon with cucumber sauce, cold game pie, roast beef, assorted salads, and for dessert, a traditional wedding cake with royal icing and marzipan decorations. The scent of fresh bread mingles with the rich aroma of the beef roasting in the cast-iron oven. Kitchen maids peel potatoes and trim asparagus tips, their fingers working rapidly as they chat in hushed tones about the grand occasion. Maids scurry about with freshly pressed linens and polished silverware. Every fork, knife, and spoon must be arranged precisely 1 inch from the edge of the table, every glass positioned just so. The butler, Mr. Peters, a dignified gentleman who has served 3 generations of Harringtons, inspects each crystal glass, holding them up to the light to check for imperfections. His practiced eye can detect the slightest smudge or water spot that might diminish the elegance of the table setting. Mrs. Porter, the flowers for the reception hall haven't arrived yet. A young maid rushes into the kitchen, her apron askew, and a look of panic on her youthful face. Lily is the newest addition to the household staff, having joined the Harrington service just 3 months ago from a nearby village. At 16, this is her first position, and the importance of the wedding day has her particularly anxious to perform her duties flawlessly. The housekeeper barely looks up from her list, a lengthy document written in her precise handwriting that details every task that must be completed before the ceremony. She adjusts her spectacles and makes a small check mark next to Polish silver serving dishes before addressing the flustered maid. "Calm yourself, Lily. Mr. Harrison will be delivering them by 8 o'clock. He has never been late in 15 years of service to this household, and I doubt he will choose today to begin such a habit." Her tone is firm but not unkind. She understands the pressure the younger staff members feel on days like this, but panic serves no purpose. "Now, has the silver been properly polished? I noticed some water spots on the gravy boat yesterday." "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Wilson finished it last night and I checked it myself this morning. Everything gleams like new." Lily's voice steadies as she reports on completed tasks, her natural efficiency reasserting itself. "And the place settings for the reception?" Mrs. Porter consults her list again, running a finger down to a specific item. "All arranged according to Miss Eleanor's instructions. 11 settings, just as she requested." Lily nods confidently, pleased to have executed this important task correctly. Mrs. Porter looks up sharply, her pencil poised mid-check mark. 11? Are you certain?" Her brow furrows in confusion. She has been overseeing the wedding preparations for months, and the intimate reception following the ceremony was always intended for 12. The bride and groom, their parents, the bride's cousin, the groom's brother, Senator Jenkins, Dr. Collins, and Mr. Edwards, whose late addition to the guest list had caused some reorganization of the seating plan. Yes, ma'am. Miss Eleanor was very specific when she came to inspect the dining room last night. She counted each setting herself and said it was perfect with 11. I thought it odd myself, but it wasn't my place to question. Lily fidgets with her apron strings, suddenly concerned she may have misunderstood her instructions. The housekeeper frowns, tapping her pencil against her list. But there are 12 guests attending the reception. I've overseen the arrangements myself. 12 people, Lily. I'm quite certain of it. I can only tell you what Miss Eleanor told me, ma'am. She was most insistent about it. 11 places, not 12. Lily's voice has dropped to just above a whisper, as though she's sharing a secret rather than reporting a work instruction. She stood in the doorway and counted them herself. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 11. Then she nodded and said, "Perfect. Do not allow anyone to add another setting, no matter what they say." Those were her exact words, ma'am. Mrs. Porter's frown deepens, etching lines into her forehead. In all her years of service, she has never known Miss Eleanor to make such an obvious error in planning, nor to be so strangely specific about an apparent mistake. Eleanor Harrington is known throughout the household for her attention to detail and clear, logical thinking, qualities she inherited from her father. This deliberate discrepancy between guests and chairs must have some purpose beyond a simple miscalculation. Very well, we shall follow the bride's instructions. Though heaven knows what Mr. Harrington will make of it when he discovers one of his guests must stand throughout the meal. She makes another check mark on her list, then adds a small question mark beside it. Perhaps Miss Eleanor intends some sort of surprise. A last-minute entertainment, perhaps, requiring the removal of one guest from the table. Or perhaps someone isn't coming after all, suggests Lily, then blushes at her own temerity in speculating about family matters. That would be a grave breach of etiquette to withdraw an acceptance on the day of the wedding itself, Mrs. Porter says firmly. And I've heard nothing of any cancellations. She snaps her notebook closed. In any case, it is not our place to question the family's decisions. We simply execute their wishes to the best of our ability. Now, see to the fresh towels in the guest washrooms. The Montgomery party will be arriving to dress for the ceremony within the hour. Mrs. Porter leaves the kitchen and makes her way through the grand house, her steps brisk and purposeful as she climbs the servants' staircase to the main floor. The manor is a maze of hallways and rooms, each more opulent than the last. The walls are hung with silk damask in rich jewel tones, adorned with oil paintings of Harrington ancestors and landscapes of the surrounding countryside. Oriental rugs cushion her steps as she passes through corridors lined with occasional tables bearing Chinese porcelain vases and delicate figurines collected by generations of the family. The Harringtons are one of the wealthiest families in the county, their fortune built on steel manufacturing and railway investments. William Harrington may lack the aristocratic lineage of the Montgomerys, but his financial acumen has earned him the respect of businessmen and politicians alike. Today's wedding is meant to solidify their social standing, uniting new money with old blood, a common strategy among the upper classes of Victorian England. The marriage has been arranged with the careful consideration one might give to a business merger, with potential benefits calculated for both parties. As Mrs. Porter passes the library, she notices the door is ajar. Inside, Eleanor's father, William Harrington, is engaged in conversation with Thomas Montgomery. She slows her pace, her innate sense of discretion warring with her concern over Eleanor's strange instruction about the chairs. Perhaps there has been some change in plans that Mr. Harrington has neglected to communicate to the staff. It wouldn't be the first time the master of the house has assumed information would travel through the household by osmosis rather than direct instruction. From her position in the hallway, she can hear fragments of their discussion, the men's voices rising and falling as they pace near the door, then move deeper into the room. Ordinarily, Mrs. Porter would never eavesdrop on the family, but the unusual situation with the seating arrangements gives her pause. She hesitates just long enough to hear William mention the contract and financial arrangements before her sense of propriety reasserts itself. With a small shake of her head, she continues on her way, her concern about the missing chair temporarily overshadowed by the myriad other tasks that require her attention before the ceremony. Inside the library, both men are dressed in formal morning attire. cutaway coats, striped trousers, and silk cravats, preparing for the ceremony. William Harrington is in his 50s, a self-made man whose steel factories have made him one of the wealthiest industrialists in the region. His beard is neatly trimmed, streaked with dignified gray that matches his temples, and his posture remains ramrod straight, a remnant of his brief military service in his youth. His manner is direct, his handshake firm, a man accustomed to commanding respect through action rather than pedigree. The library reflects his practical nature and intellectual curiosity. Floor-to-ceiling bookcases contain volumes on engineering, economics, and history, alongside the classics and modern novels. Maps of railway routes and industrial developments are framed alongside family portraits. It is a working room rather than a showpiece, with a large desk positioned to catch the northern light, its surface covered with neatly arranged correspondence and ledgers. "I've taken the liberty of inviting Senator Jenkins to the reception," William says, pouring brandy into crystal glasses despite the early hour. The amber liquid catches the light from the bay windows overlooking the rose garden. "His support will be valuable for our railway venture." Thomas accepts the glass with a nod. At 35, he is significantly older than his bride, with the polished manners of the aristocracy, but something calculating in his pale blue eyes. His family's estate borders Elmwood Manor, land rich but increasingly cash poor, a common fate for many old families in the rapidly industrializing world of the 1890s. The Montgomerys trace their lineage back to the Norman Conquest, a fact Thomas manages to reference in nearly every conversation, though he is notably silent about the mounting debts that threaten their ancestral holdings. "A wise decision, sir, though I understood the reception was to be family only." Thomas sips the brandy, his expression revealing his appreciation of its quality. The Harringtons may lack breeding, but they certainly know how to stock a cellar. William waves a dismissive hand, his signet ring glinting in the morning light. "Family and a select few others. My daughter knows the importance of such connections. In business as in marriage, one must consider the strategic advantages of each alliance." He says this without irony, apparently unaware of how his words reduce both his daughter's wedding and the senator's friendship to mere transactions. Of course, Thomas takes another measured sip of his brandy, his eyes never leaving William's face. The match between Eleanor Harrington and Thomas Montgomery is considered advantageous for both families, a merger of assets rather than a love match. The Montgomerys have an old name but dwindling resources. The Harringtons have new money but crave social legitimacy. It's a common arrangement among their class, practical, beneficial, and utterly devoid of romance. "I must say," William continues, moving to stand near the window, "Eleanor seems unusually subdued this morning. Not that she's ever been given to excessive displays of emotion, but even for her, there's a certain distance today." Thomas's fingers tighten almost imperceptibly around his glass. "Pre-wedding nerves, I expect. Women are emotional creatures, especially on such occasions." He delivers this assessment with the confidence of a man who believes he understands female psychology despite having little actual experience with women beyond superficial social interactions. William studies his future son-in-law, his businessman's eyes missing nothing, the slight tension in Thomas's shoulders, the way his gaze shifts away when Eleanor is mentioned. "You don't know my daughter very well yet, do you, Montgomery? Eleanor has never been given to emotional displays. She takes after her mother in that regard. Calm waters that run deep. What she feels intensely but privately." Thomas shifts slightly in his chair, discomfort flashing briefly across his features before his social mask reasserts itself. "I look forward to knowing her better, sir. A lifetime together will provide ample opportunity for mutual understanding." His tone suggests this is a rehearsed sentiment rather than a genuine expression of anticipation. "Yes, well." William finishes his brandy in one swift motion, placing the empty glass on a side table with a decisive click. "There will be time enough for that after today. The wedding contract will be signed immediately following the ceremony, before the reception. I've had my solicitor prepare all the necessary documents. My father will be pleased to hear it." Thomas rises as William does, understanding that their pre-ceremony conference has concluded. He has been most anxious to finalize the financial arrangements. No doubt he has. William's tone is dry. George Montgomery's eagerness to secure the Harrington fortune for his son has been apparent throughout the negotiations, though always veiled in the language of family alliance and social propriety. "The settlement is generous, as we agreed. Your family's estates will be well maintained for another generation at least." As they leave the library, William places a hand on Thomas's shoulder, stopping him momentarily. One thing more, Montgomery. My daughter is precious to me. Her happiness is important. I trust you will remember that in the years to come. Thomas meets his future father-in-law's gaze with a practiced smile. Of course, sir. Eleanor's well-being will be my paramount concern. William nods, not entirely convinced, but satisfied with the formal assurance. As they part ways to complete their preparations for the ceremony, neither man notices the shadow that passes quickly across the hallway. Eleanor's cousin, Sarah, who has overheard enough of their conversation to strengthen her existing concerns about the match. In the bridal chamber, Eleanor Harrington sits at her mahogany dressing table while her lady's maid arranges her hair. The room is elegant but not ostentatious. Cream-colored wallpaper with subtle floral patterns, a four-poster bed with silk hangings, and a writing desk positioned near the window to catch the morning light. The furnishings reflect Eleanor's preference for understated elegance over excessive ornamentation, clean lines, quality materials, and practical beauty rather than showy extravagance. Fresh flowers fill a porcelain vase on the bedside table, white roses and lilies of the valley, their fragrance sweetening the air. The wedding dress hangs from a standing mirror, its ivory satin bodice encrusted with seed pearls that must have taken hundreds of hours to sew by hand. The veil, made of Belgian lace that belonged to Eleanor's grandmother, lies carefully spread across the bed, waiting for the final touches to the bride's toilette. At 22, Eleanor is a striking young woman with porcelain skin, dark chestnut hair, and intelligent green eyes that miss little. She has inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's artistic sensibility, a combination that makes her a fascinating conversationalist and a keen observer of human nature. But there's a tightness around those eyes today that suggests something beyond pre-wedding nerves. Her fingers trace the edge of a small, leather-bound journal that sits among her perfume bottles and hairbrushes, a diary she has kept faithfully since her 16th birthday, recording not just events but her observations about the motivations and behaviors of those around her. "You look troubled, miss," her maid observes, carefully pinning a section of hair in the fashionable Gibson style. Agnes has been Eleanor's personal maid since she returned from finishing school in Switzerland 3 years ago. At 30, she occupies that perfect middle ground of experience and energy required for attending to a young lady of Eleanor's position. She is also one of the few people who sees Eleanor without her social mask, who knows the private thoughts and concerns that lie beneath the composed exterior presented to the world. Eleanor meets her eyes in the gilt-framed mirror. "Do I, Agnes?" "Perhaps it's just the weight of the day. They say a bride should be nervous." Her voice is controlled, measured, the voice of a woman who has learned that displaying emotion too openly is considered unbecoming in their social circle. "It's a blessed day, miss. You're marrying into one of the oldest families in the county. Many would envy your position." Agnes secures another pin, deftly tucking a stray strand of hair into place. Her own position in the household will be elevated by association with Eleanor's rise in social standing. Would they? Eleanor's voice is soft, but carries an edge that makes Agnes's hands pause momentarily in their work. "I wonder if they would still feel that way if they knew everything I know." There's a moment of uncomfortable silence between them. Agnes resumes her work, but her movements are more cautious now, as though she senses dangerous ground ahead. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, miss." "No, I suppose you don't." Eleanor picks up her silver-backed hairbrush and turns it in her hands, watching how the light plays across its engraved surface. It was a gift from James Edwards on her 20th birthday, back when their future seemed certain, their path clear, before the anonymous letter that had sent him fleeing to Europe, convinced of her betrayal. Before the Montgomerys had appeared with their convenient interest in a merger between the families. "Sometimes I think ignorance must be a comfort, Agnes, to accept things at face value without looking deeper, without questioning motives or examining inconsistencies." A knock at the door interrupts them. Agnes moves to answer it, grateful for the distraction from Eleanor's unsettling mood. She opens the door to find Mrs. Porter waiting outside, her normally composed face showing signs of confusion. "Begging your pardon, Miss Eleanor, but I wish to confirm the seating arrangements for the reception." The housekeeper enters the room with a small curtsy, her notebook clutched in one hand. Though she would ordinarily address such a routine question to Agnes, rather than disturbing the bride on her wedding day, the discrepancy in chair count warrants direct clarification. Eleanor doesn't turn from the mirror, continuing to study her reflection as though searching for someone she once knew in the familiar features. The white satin dressing gown she wears while her hair is being arranged makes her look almost ghostly in the morning light filtering through the lace curtains. What about them? Lily informs me you requested only 11 place settings, but I understood there would be 12 guests at the intimate reception. Mrs. Porter's tone is carefully neutral, but there's a hint of concern beneath the professional detachment. Now Eleanor does turn, her movement deliberate and controlled. Her green eyes fix on Mrs. Porter with an intensity that momentarily disconcerts the experienced housekeeper. There will indeed be 12 people present, Mrs. Porter, but only 11 will require chairs. Her voice is clear and precise, allowing no room for misinterpretation. The housekeeper's confusion is evident, etched in the furrow between her brows and the slight parting of her lips. In her decades of household management, she has encountered many unusual requests and accommodated countless whims of the wealthy. But this cryptic instruction defies easy categorization. I don't understand, miss. You don't need to understand. You need only to follow my instructions. Eleanor's tone brooks no argument, though it remains civil. It is the voice of someone who has calculated each move in a complex game and will not be diverted from their strategy by well-meaning questions. Mrs. Porter bows slightly, recognizing the dismissal in Eleanor's tone. Her years in service have taught her when to pursue a matter and when to retreat. As you wish, miss. She retreats, closing the door behind her, but not before exchanging a concerned glance with Agnes. The bride's behavior is most unusual, even allowing for pre-wedding nerves. Once in the corridor, Mrs. Porter pauses, troubled by Eleanor's strange instruction. In her 30 years of service to the Harrington family, she has never known the young mistress to be capricious or illogical. Eleanor has always been precise in her requirements, thoughtful in her decisions. This deliberate discrepancy between guests and chairs must have meaning beyond a simple whim or oversight. She makes a notation in her book before continuing her rounds, her mind turning over possible explanations. Perhaps one guest will arrive late and join them only for dessert. Perhaps someone will be called away on urgent business during the meal. Or perhaps, and this thought gives her pause, Miss Eleanor anticipates that someone will leave the reception under less than pleasant circumstances. The very idea sends a ripple of unease through the housekeeper's professional composure. Mrs. Porter makes her way through the grand house, mentally reviewing the guest list for the intimate reception. The wedding ceremony itself will be attended by over 50 people in the estate's chapel, but afterward, only the closest family members and a few select others will gather for the private celebration in the dining room. The bride and groom, naturally, their parents, William and Margaret Harrington, George and Victoria Montgomery, Eleanor's cousin Sarah, who is more like a sister than a distant relation, Thomas's brother Robert, known throughout the county for his gambling habits and questionable associations, Senator Jenkins, whose political influence is courted by both families, Dr. Collins, the family physician who has attended Eleanor since her birth, and finally, James Edwards, whose invitation had been a point of contention between Eleanor and her father just last week. A heated discussion that Mrs. Porter had inadvertently overheard while delivering fresh linens to the library. In another room, Eleanor's cousin Sarah helps arrange the bride's veil. The bridal suite is filled with the scent of orange blossoms and roses. Ladies' maids fuss over the intricate lace trim of Eleanor's ivory satin gown, while Agnes carefully secures the pearl-encrusted veil to Eleanor's coiffure with diamond pins, a wedding gift from the Montgomerys, delivered the previous evening in a velvet box with a note from Victoria expressing her pleasure in welcoming Eleanor to the family. Unlike the servants, Sarah speaks to Eleanor as an equal. At 24, she is Eleanor's closest confidant, a spirited young woman with auburn hair and freckles who has always been more sister than cousin. The daughter of Margaret Harrington's brother, Sarah came to live with the Harringtons after her parents' death in a boating accident when she was 12. Where Eleanor is reserved and analytical, Sarah is passionate and impulsive, complementary temperaments that have formed the basis of their deep friendship. "You're making a mistake, Ellie," she says quietly, adjusting a fold of the veil so that the others cannot hear their conversation. She uses the childhood nickname that few are permitted to use now that Eleanor is a grown woman preparing to become a wife. "Am I?" Eleanor adjusts a pearl hairpin, her voice calm but her fingers betraying a slight tremor. She has been anticipating this conversation since she announced her engagement to Thomas 3 months ago. Sarah has never hidden her skepticism about the match, though she has been careful to express it only in private. "You know you are. It's not too late to call this off." I've seen how you look at Thomas, or rather, how you don't look at him. There's no affection there, no connection. This isn't like you, Ellie. You've always said you wouldn't marry without genuine regard, without intellectual companionship. What changed? Sarah's hazel eyes search Eleanor's face for some explanation of her cousin's puzzling acceptance of a loveless match. Eleanor's laugh is hollow, barely more than a whisper, and causes scandal that would ruin my father. The invitations sent, the gifts received, the contracts drawn up. I think not. Father has invested too much in this union, financially and socially. The Montgomerys' name lends our family the respectability that 3 generations of industry cannot purchase outright. Better a day of scandal than a lifetime of unhappiness. Sarah's voice is passionate but low, mindful of the servants moving about the room. She takes Eleanor's hands in hers, feeling the chill of her cousin's fingers, despite the warm September morning. Look at me, Ellie. Is this truly what you want? To be Mrs. Thomas Montgomery, mistress of a crumbling estate, married to a man who cares more for your father's money than for you? Who says I'll be unhappy? The Montgomerys are an excellent family. Thomas will give me a respectable position in society. Eleanor withdraws her hands and turns back to the mirror, studying her reflection with critical detachment. Not all marriages are based on romantic attachment, Sarah. Many successful unions are founded on mutual advantage and respect. Respect? Sarah's eyebrows rise incredulously. Is that what you call it? Thomas respects your dowry, perhaps, but I've never heard him express interest in your thoughts or opinions. He talks over you at dinner, dismisses your ideas about the estate improvements, and spent more time discussing horse breeding with your father last week than he did speaking with you. Eleanor's calm facade cracks slightly. A flash of something, perhaps pain, perhaps anger, crossing her features before she controls it. Marriage isn't a novel, Sarah. It's a practical arrangement, especially for women in our position. Security, social standing, the opportunity to manage one's own household. These are the realistic considerations for a woman of sense. Sarah places her hands on Eleanor's shoulders, forcing her cousin to meet her gaze in the mirror. The contrast between them is striking. Sarah's natural vivacity and warmth against Eleanor's controlled elegance. Stop it, Ellie. This isn't you speaking. You've never cared for position or respectability above all else. The Eleanor I know values honesty, integrity, genuine connection. The Eleanor I know would rather read philosophy in the garden than preside over formal dinners. The Eleanor I know once told me she would rather live in a cottage with a man of character and intellect than in a palace with a duke who couldn't appreciate Wordsworth. She pauses, her voice softening. And I know about the letters. Eleanor's face pales, the slight color that had been in her cheeks draining away. She pulls away from Sarah's touch, ostensibly to adjust her veil, but really to hide the sudden vulnerability in her expression. What letters? The ones you've been receiving from James. The ones you've kept hidden in your poetry book. Tennyson, isn't it? I noticed the bulge in the binding. Sarah's tone is gentle now, understanding rather than accusing. He's been writing to you for months. You had no right to look through my things. Eleanor's voice wavers between anger and something more fragile. She moves to the window, putting physical distance between herself and the conversation. I had every right as someone who loves you, as the only person in this house who seems concerned with your happiness rather than your social advancement. Sarah follows her, undeterred by Eleanor's attempt to withdraw. James still cares for you, Ellie. That much is clear from his letters. He's back from Europe. Has been for weeks, according to what I've heard. He asked to see you. It doesn't matter. Eleanor stares out at the gardens where chairs are being arranged for the ceremony, where her future is being constructed piece by piece without any apparent input from her. The arrangements are made, the decisions taken. Arrangements can be unmade. Sarah's voice takes on an edge of desperation. Contracts can be torn up. It would cause a stir, yes, but the gossip would die down eventually. Your happiness is worth more than a few weeks of scandalous whispers. Not these arrangements. Eleanor's voice hardens, taking on a tone Sarah has rarely heard from her usually gentle cousin. There's something in it that sounds almost like satisfaction. Not after what happened. Sarah's expression shifts from concern to confusion, her brow furrowing as she tries to make sense of Eleanor's cryptic response. What are you talking about? What happened? She studies her cousin's profile, noting the determined set of her jaw, the almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Ellie, what have you done? But Eleanor merely adjusts her veil, smoothing the delicate lace with careful fingers. It's almost time for the ceremony. You should check that Mother is ready. You know how easily she becomes overwhelmed by large gatherings. It's a deliberate change of subject. A door firmly closed on the previous conversation. Sarah hesitates, clearly wanting to press the issue, but Eleanor's expression makes it clear that no further explanations will be forthcoming, at least not now. With a sigh of frustration, she concedes temporary defeat. This isn't finished, Ellie. Whatever you're planning, whatever you're hiding, I hope you know what you're doing. As she leaves the bridal chamber, Sarah casts one last concerned glance at her cousin, who has returned to her seat at the dressing table, her face once again a mask of bridal serenity. But there's something different now. A gleam in Eleanor's eyes that suggests not resignation but resolve. Not a woman walking to her fate, but one orchestrating it. Once alone, Eleanor sits motionless for a long moment, her breathing steady, her hands folded in her lap, a portrait of calm deliberation. Then, with sudden purpose, she rises and moves to her writing desk. From around her wrist, she removes a small key that hangs on a thin ribbon concealed beneath the lace of her sleeve. The key fits a locked drawer in the desk, a private repository for her most personal possessions. The drawer slides open smoothly, revealing its contents: a leather-bound journal, several small trinkets with sentimental rather than monetary value, and most prominently, a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon. She lifts the packet carefully, as though it contains something precious and fragile. The paper is of excellent quality, the handwriting bold and masculine. Some of the letters are clearly older, the paper slightly yellowed, the ink faded. Others appear more recent, the creases still sharp from their original folding. She runs her fingers over the top letter, tracing the signature. "With all my heart, James." For a moment, her composed expression falters, revealing a complex mixture of emotions: regret, tenderness, determination, and something harder to define. A plan long in formation, perhaps, finally approaching its execution. After a moment's hesitation, she walks to the fireplace where a small fire has been lit to ward off the morning chill. With deliberate movements, she tosses the bundle in, watching as the flames begin to lick at the edges of the paper. The camera focuses on the letters as they catch fire, the edges blackening, the words disappearing into ash, secrets and sentiments reduced to cinders. But as the fire consumes the paper, we notice that Eleanor has kept one letter back, slipping it into a hidden pocket sewn into her wedding gown, a detail that will become significant later. She watches until the last letter crumbles into ash, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. There's no sadness in her expression now, only resolution. Whatever these letters represented, a past love perhaps, or evidence of some sort, their destruction marks a turning point, a commitment to the course she has set for herself. The scene transitions to the small chapel on the Harrington estate. It's an elegant structure of honey-colored stone, built by William's father as a statement of the family's rising prosperity. Today it is transformed by flowers, white roses and lilies banking every surface, their perfume heavy in the air. Sunlight streams through stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned patterns across the polished oak pews and stone floor. The pews are filled with the county's elite, ladies in feathered hats and gentlemen in formal attire, creating a tapestry of silk, satin, and fine wool. Conversations hum in hushed tones. Speculation about the union of the industrialist's daughter and the aristocrat's son providing ample fodder for gossip. Several guests cast curious glances toward the Montgomerys, whose financial difficulties are an open secret in their social circle, despite efforts to maintain appearances. The Montgomery family, led by Thomas's parents, George and Victoria, greet arriving guests with practiced smiles. George Montgomery is tall and imperious, his silver-streaked hair and patrician features marking him as a man of breeding. His morning coat is impeccably tailored, but, to the discerning eye, shows signs of having been altered and updated rather than newly made, a subtle indicator of the family's strained circumstances. Victoria stands slightly behind her husband, as befits a proper Victorian wife, but there's a nervousness in her manner, a tendency to flinch when George speaks too sharply to the servants directing guests to their seats. Their elder son Robert lounges near the chapel entrance, observing the proceedings with cynical amusement. At 38, he bears the dissipated look of a man who has pursued pleasure at the expense of purpose, his once handsome features blurred by years of excess. His cravat is slightly askew, his eyes bloodshot from the previous evening's indulgences, As heir to the Montgomery estate, such as it is, he has watched his inheritance dwindle under his father's mismanagement, pinning his hopes for financial recovery on his brother's advantageous marriage. The parish rector stands ready at the altar, prayer book in hand. He has known both families for decades, having baptized Eleanor and confirmed Thomas in this very chapel. A string quartet positioned discreetly in the side chapel plays Mendelssohn's Wedding March in the corner, the musicians' fingers moving deftly across their instruments. Everything is arranged for a perfect society wedding, the culmination of months of planning and years of social maneuvering. Senator Jenkins arrives accompanied by his wife, a formidable society matron whose approval can make or break reputations. Dr. Collins, the Harrington family physician, takes his seat near the front, medical bag placed carefully under the pew as always, a habit formed over 30 years of being prepared for emergencies at social gatherings. Margaret Harrington, Eleanor's mother, is escorted to her place by a footman, her fragile health evident in her slow movements and the slight tremor in her hands as she arranges her silk skirts. George Montgomery pulls his son aside for a moment, stepping behind a floral arrangement where they cannot be overheard. His smile remains fixed for the benefit of any watching guests, but his voice is hard as he grasps Thomas's arm with surprising strength for a man in his 60s. Everything is in place. The question is phrased as an inquiry but delivered as a demand, leaving no room for anything but affirmation. Thomas nods, the movement slight but definitive. The marriage contract is prepared for signing after the ceremony, precisely as negotiated. Father, are you certain this is necessary? Eleanor seems different today, more remote than usual. There's something in her manner that concerns me. He keeps his voice low, mindful of the guests only feet away, their ears always attuned for fragments of private conversation that might prove interesting. Do you wish to see our family name dragged through the mud? Our creditors knocking at our door? George's fingers dig into his son's arm, leaving marks that will later bloom into bruises. His voice remains a controlled hiss, decades of social training preventing any outward display of the desperation that drives him. The Harrington money will solve our problems, and Eleanor is the key to that money. Her remoteness is irrelevant. She will be your wife in the eyes of God and the law. That is all that matters. Thomas winces at his father's grip, but knows better than to pull away. He has spent a lifetime navigating George Montgomery's volatile moods, has learned when to push back and when to acquiesce. This is not a moment for defiance. I understand the financial necessity, Father. I merely suggest that Eleanor may suspect something. She's more intelligent than you give her credit for. Intelligence in a woman is like salt in cooking, useful in small quantities but ruinous in excess. George releases Thomas's arm with a dismissive gesture. Whatever suspicions she may harbor will be irrelevant once the contracts are signed. Harrington's lawyers have assured me that the settlement will be transferred immediately, enough to satisfy Blackwood and the other creditors, with sufficient remaining to restore the east wing of the estate and hire a proper staff again. And if she refuses to sign, Thomas straightens his cuffs, covering his father's momentary lapse in decorum. George's smile turns cold. She won't. Not if she values her family's reputation. I've made certain arrangements to ensure her cooperation, should it prove necessary to apply additional persuasion. He glances across the chapel to where James Edwards has just entered, taking a seat at the back. Though I trust such measures will not be required, Eleanor Harrington strikes me as a practical young woman, not given to romantic notions or impulsive actions. Thomas's eyes follow his father's gaze, narrowing slightly when they land on Edwards. I thought you said he was still in Europe, that the letter had ensured his permanent absence. A minor miscalculation, George admits, the words clearly difficult for him to speak. It seems Mr. Edwards has more resilience than anticipated. No matter. His presence may actually work to our advantage, demonstrating Eleanor's commitment to her new family despite previous attachments. The pause is delicate, hinting at knowledge that would be damaging if made public. And if he speaks with Eleanor, if he reveals, he won't. George's confidence is absolute. He values his reputation too much to create a scene, and after today, any revelations would be pointless. The law will be on our side, the money in our accounts. Now, compose yourself. The ceremony is about to begin, and you must look like a man eagerly anticipating his bride, not a conspirator discussing strategy. The chapel fills with guests. Among them is James Edwards, who sits alone at the back, his face partially obscured by shadow. He is handsome in a poetic way, dark hair falling across his forehead, intense eyes that miss nothing. He wears a well-cut but understated suit, and there's a slight tan to his skin that suggests recent time abroad. Several of the older ladies eye him with curiosity, whispering behind gloved hands about his identity and his unexpected return from the continent. The organist begins the processional, the music swelling through the small chapel. The congregation rises, turning toward the entrance where the bridal party will appear. William Harrington emerges from the vestibule, Eleanor on his arm. There's pride in William's bearing, but also a hint of concern as he glances down at his daughter's composed face. As the ceremony begins and Eleanor walks down the aisle on her father's arm, the mysterious man leans forward, allowing the light from the stained glass windows to fall across his features. This is James Edwards, once Eleanor's most ardent suitor, now returned from a 2-year absence abroad. His expression as he watches Eleanor approach the altar is one of carefully controlled anguish, visible only in the tightness around his eyes and the slight clenching of his jaw. Eleanor herself is a vision in ivory satin and Brussels lace. Her gown is the height of fashion, with a fitted bodice, leg of mutton sleeves, and a train that requires 2 young cousins to manage its length. Seed pearls have been painstakingly sewn into elaborate patterns on the bodice and along the hem, catching the light with each step she takes. Orange blossoms, symbols of purity and fertility, are woven into her dark hair alongside the diamond pins that secure her veil. Her face behind the veil is composed, her steps measured and unhurried. Only someone who knows her very well would notice how tightly she grips her bouquet of white roses, or how she fixes her gaze slightly above Thomas's head, rather than meeting his eyes. There is determination in her bearing, rather than bridal excitement, the posture of someone executing a difficult but necessary task. As she passes James's pew, there's a momentary hesitation in her step, so brief that only he notices it. Their eyes meet for an instant, a silent exchange passing between them before Eleanor continues her steady progress toward the altar. In that fleeting glance lies a wealth of history, shared confidences, broken promises, unresolved questions. Thomas waits at the altar, his expression appropriate for a bridegroom, solemn yet pleased. He takes Eleanor's hand from her father's with a slight bow, a gesture meant to convey respect and gratitude. If his fingers close around hers with more possession than affection, only Eleanor is in a position to notice. The ceremony proceeds with solemn dignity. Vows are exchanged, rings given and received. Throughout it all, Eleanor's face remains composed, her voice steady. Only someone watching very closely would notice how she avoids looking directly at her new husband, or how her hands tremble slightly as they hold her bouquet. After the ceremony, the couple stands in the chapel doorway, receiving congratulations from the departing guests. Thomas keeps a proprietary hand at Eleanor's waist, his expression one of triumph poorly disguised as happiness. Eleanor accepts kisses and good wishes with grace, but there's a remoteness to her smile that becomes more pronounced as the reception draws near. When James Edwards approaches, there's a momentary faltering in her composure. Their eyes meet for the first time in 2 years, and something passes between them, a current of recognition, of shared history. "Mrs. Montgomery," James says formally, using her new title with careful precision, "may I offer my congratulations?" "Mr. Edwards," Eleanor replies, equally formal. "How unexpected to see you. I understood you were still in Europe. I returned last month on family business." His eyes never leave her face. "Your father was kind enough to extend an invitation when he learned of my return. How very thoughtful of him." Something flickers in Eleanor's eyes. Knowledge, perhaps, or warning. Thomas's hand tightens at Eleanor's waist. "Edwards, I wasn't aware you were acquainted with my wife. Mr. Edwards and I were childhood neighbors," Eleanor explains smoothly, "before his family moved to London." "Indeed," James offers a slight bow. "I'll not keep you from your other guests. Again, my congratulations to you both." As he moves away, Eleanor watches him for a fraction too long before turning back to the next well-wisher. Soon after, the select group of 12, the bride and groom, their parents, Eleanor's cousin Sarah, Thomas's brother Robert, Senator Jenkins, James Edwards, and the family physician Dr. Collins, who is a close friend of the Harringtons, move to the manor's formal dining room for the intimate reception. As they enter, there's a moment of confusion. The long mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine and set with the finest Harrington silver and china, has only 11 chairs arranged around it. 11 Limoges place settings with hand-painted borders, 11 crystal champagne flutes waiting to be filled, 11 embroidered napkins folded into perfect swans, but 12 guests stand hesitating at the threshold. The discrepancy is immediately apparent, creating an awkward pause in the proceedings. The guests look at each other, uncertain. Thomas's brother Robert laughs nervously, assuming a servant's error. Senator Jenkins harumphs in disapproval, while Dr. Collins observes the scene with the quiet attention of a man accustomed to diagnosing problems. There appears to be a mistake, William Harrington says, frowning at the arrangement. He turns to the butler who stands at attention near the sideboard. Peters, we require another place setting immediately. No mistake, Father. Eleanor's voice is clear and unwavering. She moves toward the head of the table with serene confidence. The seating is precisely as I instructed. William's frown deepens, lines of confusion creasing his forehead. But we are 12, Eleanor. Yes, we are. She surveys the room, her gaze lingering on each face before coming to rest on her new husband. Her eyes hold no warmth when they meet his, but one of us will not be seated. A tense silence falls over the room. The butler and footman exchange glances, uncertain whether to withdraw or remain. With a subtle gesture from William, they retreat, closing the double doors behind them. The 12 guests remain standing, the 11 chairs between them like a physical manifestation of Eleanor's cryptic statement. Thomas laughs nervously, the sound jarring in the silence. My dear, what an unusual joke. Perhaps the excitement of the day has affected your humor. I am not joking, Thomas. Eleanor's voice has taken on a steely quality that few in the room have heard before. She turns to address the entire group, her wedding gown rustling softly with the movement. Before we dine, before we toast our union, there is a matter that must be addressed, a matter concerning truth and deception. Dr. Collins steps forward, medical concern evident in his expression. He has known Eleanor since she was a child, has treated every illness, has been a surrogate uncle since the death of her mother's brother. Eleanor, my dear, perhaps this is not the time. It is precisely the time, doctor. Before food is served, before wine is poured. She moves to the head of the table but does not sit. Her hand rests on the back of the chair, fingers gripping the carved wood. I have recently come into possession of certain information that changes everything about this day, this marriage, this gathering. Victoria Montgomery's face has gone pale, the color draining from her cheeks. Her gloved hand flutters to her throat. What is she talking about, Thomas? Thomas moves toward Eleanor, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. There's a moment when his eyes meet his father's across the room, a silent exchange that does not go unnoticed by Eleanor. My dear, you're overwrought. The excitement of the day? Do not touch me. Eleanor's voice cuts like ice. Not until all is revealed. The tension in the room is palpable. Sarah moves to stand near her cousin, a silent show of support. James Edwards remains near the door, watchful and alert, his hand straying to the inside pocket of his coat where a folded document lies hidden. Eleanor continues, her voice steady despite the heightened emotion in the room. 2 years ago, James Edwards left for Europe suddenly. Many of you wondered why. The explanation given was a sudden business opportunity that required his immediate attention. The truth was something else entirely. James shifts uncomfortably, his expression guarded but intent on Eleanor's every word. James left because he received an anonymous letter claiming I had betrayed him, that I had formed an attachment to another man. The letter included intimate details of conversations we had shared in private, details that only someone close to me could have known. James believed this letter because of these details, and without confronting me, he departed for the continent. Eleanor's mother, Margaret Harrington, gasps softly. She is a frail woman, often ill, who has allowed her husband to manage most family affairs. But in this moment, her eyes are sharp with sudden understanding. Eleanor, please. Let me finish, Mother. For 2 years I have wondered who could have written such a letter, who would have wanted to separate me from the man I loved, who would have benefited from my heartbreak and confusion. She reaches into a hidden pocket in her wedding gown and withdraws a folded piece of paper. The cream vellum is expensive, the black ink slightly faded but still legible. This letter arrived from London last week. It is from the widow of Mr. Peterson, James's former business partner, who passed away last month. Upon her husband's death, she found something among his effects, a draft of the letter sent to James, and notes indicating who had paid him to write it. All eyes turn to the letter in Eleanor's hand. The room is utterly silent now. even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seeming to pause in anticipation. She unfolds it slowly, deliberately, the paper crackling in the stillness. The person who arranged for that letter, who paid to have James driven away from me, who orchestrated the circumstances that led to this day, this wedding, was— A sudden crash interrupts her. One of the crystal glasses has fallen to the floor, shattered by Thomas's hand as he lunged toward Eleanor. The sound is shocking in the tense silence, crystal fragments scattering across the polished parquet floor. "Enough of this nonsense!" he shouts, his composure completely broken. His face has flushed a deep red, and a vein pulses visibly at his temple. "I will not stand here and be subjected to these theatrical accusations on my wedding day." George Montgomery moves quickly to his son's side, placing a restraining hand on his arm. His voice is low and urgent. "Thomas, control yourself. This is hardly the behavior of a gentleman. I will not stand here and listen to these baseless accusations." Thomas's voice rises, echoing off the high ceiling. His eyes dart frantically between Eleanor and the letter she holds. "This is absurd. A fiction concocted to what? To embarrass me? To create a spectacle?" Eleanor regards him coldly, her composure unshaken by his outburst. "I have not yet accused you of anything, Thomas. How interesting that you assume I was about to." The atmosphere in the room shifts as the implications of her words sink in. William Harrington steps forward, his expression thunderous, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He turns to face George Montgomery directly. "What is the meaning of this, Montgomery? Did you interfere with my daughter's prior attachment?" Before Thomas can answer, his father intervenes. "This is hardly the time or place for such discussions. We are here to celebrate a union, not to dredge up old misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" Eleanor's laugh is bitter. "Is that what you call deliberate deception, Mr. Montgomery? The systematic destruction of my happiness for your family's financial gain?" Victoria Montgomery rises from her chair, trembling. "George, what is she talking about? What have you done?" George's face hardens. "Be silent, Victoria. You understand nothing of men's affairs." "I understand enough." She turns to Eleanor. "What proof do you have of these allegations?" Eleanor holds up the letter. "Mrs. Peterson's testimony. And this." She withdraws a second paper from her pocket. "A copy of the bank draft used to pay Mr. Peterson, signed by your husband." The room erupts in chaos. Accusations fly, denials are shouted, exclamations of shock and disbelief fill the air. Through it all, Eleanor stands unmoved at the head of the table, the evidence clutched in her hand. Suddenly, a new voice cuts through the tumult. "I believe I can shed some light on this situation." All heads turn toward James Edwards, who has remained silent until now. He steps forward into the center of the room. "What Eleanor has not yet told you is that I returned from Europe a month ago. When I learned of her engagement, I was devastated. But I also began to question the letter I had received 2 years earlier. The timing seemed too convenient, the details too perfect." James moves to stand beside Eleanor. "I hired a private investigator who traced the letter back to Mr. Peterson, and from him to George Montgomery." William Harrington's face contorts with rage. "You engineered this marriage to save your failing finances. You deliberately separated my daughter from the man she loved for money." George Montgomery's expression remains defiant. "And what of it? Business is business. The merger of our families benefits us both, Harrington. Your new money gains respectability through our old name. Our empty coffers are replenished by your industry. It's a fair exchange. Not when it involves my daughter's happiness." Thomas looks between his father and his new bride, his expression confused and increasingly desperate. "Father, you told me Eleanor had rejected Edwards, that she was agreeable to our match. She is your wife now," George snaps. "That is all that matters." Eleanor's voice cuts through the argument like a blade. "No, it is not all that matters. The truth matters. Justice matters." She turns to Thomas. "Did you know of your father's scheme?" Thomas hesitates, and in that hesitation, Eleanor reads her answer. "You did know. Perhaps not at first, but you knew before today. And still you went through with this charade." "Eleanor, please." Thomas reaches for her hand. "What's done is done. We are married now. In time you may come to what? To love the man who helped steal my happiness? To respect the family that built their salvation on my misery?" She withdraws her hand from his reach. "I think not." Senator Jenkins, who has been watching the proceedings with growing discomfort, clears his throat. "Perhaps I should take my leave. This appears to be a private family matter." "Please stay, Senator," Eleanor says coolly. "You should witness what happens when corruption is exposed." William Harrington moves to his daughter's side. What do you intend to do, Eleanor? She looks at him steadily. What would you have me do, father? Remain in a marriage founded on lies? Live as the wife of a man who conspired against me? Before William can answer, Dr. Collins steps forward. If I may make a suggestion, there could be grounds for annulment. The marriage was entered into under false pretenses, with crucial information deliberately withheld. George Montgomery laughs harshly. Annulment? And create a public scandal? Think of your reputation, Harrington. Think of your business interests. I am thinking of my daughter, William replies firmly. Eleanor's mother, who has been silent until now, suddenly speaks. There is another way. All eyes turn to Margaret Harrington. The marriage contract has not yet been signed. The dowry has not been transferred. George Montgomery's face pales. That was to be done tomorrow. Indeed. Margaret nods. So legally, while the religious ceremony has taken place, the financial arrangement, which was, after all, your primary concern, has not been completed. Victoria Montgomery rises shakily to her feet. George, how could you? How could you use our son this way? To save our family from ruin, George shouts. To preserve the Montgomery name. At what cost? Victoria turns to Eleanor. My dear, I knew nothing of this. Had I known, it doesn't matter now. Eleanor interrupts gently. What matters is what we do next. The tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a knife. 11 chairs, 12 people. One standing at the crossroads of truth and deception, the past and the future. It is Dr. Collins who breaks the silence. I believe, given these extraordinary circumstances, that we should adjourn this reception. Legal counsel should be sought before any further decisions are made. William Harrington nods in agreement. A wise suggestion, Doctor. Montgomery, I suggest you and your family take your leave. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow. George Montgomery's face contorts with fury. This isn't over, Harrington. On the contrary, William replies coldly. I believe it is. As the Montgomerys prepare to leave, Thomas turns to Eleanor one last time. I did come to care for you in my way. Eleanor meets his gaze steadily, but not enough to tell me the truth. Would it have made a difference? We'll never know, will we? Thomas bows stiffly and follows his parents from the room. Senator Jenkins makes a hasty departure as well, murmuring awkward condolences. The room falls silent as the door closes behind them. Eleanor remains standing at the head of the table, surrounded by the 11 place settings that now seem prophetic rather than mysterious. I knew, she says softly. Somehow, I knew it would end this way. James approaches her cautiously. Eleanor, Not now, James. She looks exhausted suddenly, the strength that carried her through the confrontation ebbing away. There will be time to talk later. Dr. Collins moves to her side. You should rest, my dear. This has been an ordeal. Yes, she agrees. It has. As Eleanor leaves the dining room, leaning on Dr. Collins' arm, the camera pans across the abandoned reception table. 11 chairs, 11 place settings. The 12th person, Thomas, no longer present, no longer part of their circle. The camera lingers on the elegant floral centerpiece, the untouched champagne, the perfect table setting now disrupted by the broken glass on the floor. Physical evidence of the shattered illusions that had brought them all to this moment. Sarah approaches James, who stands watching Eleanor's departure with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. His dark eyes follow her until she disappears from view. Give her time, Sarah advises, placing a gentle hand on his arm. She's been through more than any of us realized. This day has been difficult. Will she ever forgive me for believing that letter? For leaving without questioning it? James's voice is low, touched with self-recrimination. I should have trusted what I knew of her character rather than the words of a stranger. I don't know. That's for Eleanor to decide. Sarah's expression softens. But she arranged for you to be here today. She made certain you received an invitation, even against my uncle's initial objections. That must count for something. James nods thoughtfully. Yes, I suppose it must. Senator Jenkins approaches William Harrington, who stands staring out the window at the garden where, just hours ago, his daughter had been married. Most unfortunate business, Harrington. Most unfortunate. I think perhaps I should take my leave. William turns to him, his expression grave. My apologies, Senator, that you were witness to this revelation. I hope I can count on your discretion. Of course, of course. Family matters should remain private. But the railway venture, perhaps we should discuss it another time. The scene shifts to later that evening. The sun has set, casting Elmwood Manor into shadow. Gas lamps flickered to life along the corridors, creating pools of golden light amid the darkness. The guests have gone, their carriages rolling down the gravel drive in a procession of awkward departures. The servants move quietly, their usual chatter subdued as they clear away the untouched food and drink from the reception that never truly took place. In the East Wing, Victoria Montgomery supervises the packing of their belongings. Her hands shake as she folds Thomas's cravat into a valise. "How could you, George? How could you do such a thing?" Her voice trembles with suppressed emotion. George Montgomery stands by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. It was necessary. The girl was infatuated with a nobody. Edwards had prospects but no real standing, no connections that could benefit us. The Harringtons, for all their new money vulgarity, offered salvation for our family. At what cost? Victoria turns to face her husband, displaying a rare moment of defiance. Our reputation, our honor, our son's chance at a happy marriage. Honor doesn't pay creditors, George snaps. Honor doesn't maintain estates or feed servants or keep one's position in society. Money does that. The Harrington money was to do that. And now? What will sustain us now that your scheme has been exposed? George drains his whiskey. This isn't over. The marriage has taken place. The law will side with them after what you've done. Victoria interrupts. William Harrington has the ear of judges and politicians. He will not allow his daughter to remain tied to our family. Not now. In the library, Eleanor sits alone in her father's leather chair, still in her wedding dress, though she has removed the veil. The ivory satin is crumpled from the day's events, a symbolic reflection of the promises that have been crushed. She stares into the fire, its flames reflecting in her eyes, as she contemplates the dramatic turn her life has taken in a single day. There's a soft knock at the door. It's her father, still in his formal attire, though his cravat has been loosened, his collar unbuttoned. William Harrington looks older tonight, the lines in his face deepened by the day's events. "May I join you?" he asks, his voice gentle. She nods, and he takes a seat in the chair opposite her. For a moment, they sit in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. Outside, rain has begun to fall, pattering against the library windows like distant applause. "I've spoken with Judge Patterson," William says finally. "He believes we have strong grounds to have the marriage invalidated. It will require some discretion, some careful management of the story we present to society, but it can be done. The judge is an old friend. He understands the delicacy of the situation." "Thank you, Father." Eleanor's voice is tired but relieved. She reaches out to touch her father's hand briefly, a rare gesture of affection between them. The Harringtons, like most families of their class and time, are not given to demonstrative displays. William studies his daughter's face in the firelight. "You knew, didn't you? Before the letter from Mrs. Peterson arrived. You suspected something was wrong with Thomas's courtship." Eleanor sighs, the sound soft but heavy with the weight of months of suspicion and silent observation. "I had my doubts. His interests seemed to come from nowhere, and so soon after James left, there was something calculated in his attentions. And there were comments he made about our finances, questions that seemed too pointed for mere conversation. But I had no proof until Mrs. Peterson wrote to me. Why didn't you come to me with your suspicions? I would have investigated, would have protected you from this travesty." There's hurt in William's voice, a father's pain at having failed to shield his child. "Would you have believed me? Over the prospect of joining our family with the Montgomerys? You were so pleased with the match, Father, so certain it was the right step for our family's standing." William winces at the implied criticism, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I would like to think so. I have always valued your happiness above social connections, Eleanor." "Have you?" Her question is not accusatory, but genuinely curious. "You pushed for this match quite forcefully, Father. The Montgomerys' name for our money, isn't that what everyone said? A fair exchange of assets. I wanted to secure your future," William protests. "To ensure you would always have position and respect. The industrial world is changing rapidly, Eleanor. Old fortunes fall, new ones rise. I thought an alliance with an established family would protect you from the vicissitudes of this new age." Eleanor's smile is sad but understanding. "I know you meant well, but I would rather face an uncertain future with truth than a secure one built on deception." William nods, accepting her wisdom. "You're right, of course, and braver than I gave you credit for." He rises from his chair, moving to stand beside her. "It's not quite over. The Montgomerys may contest the invalidation, though I doubt they'll succeed given the evidence of their deception. There will be talk, of course. Society loves nothing more than scandal. It doesn't matter now. Eleanor turns back to the fire. Let them talk. The truth is worth whatever gossip follows. Not quite. William hesitates. James Edwards is still here. He's asked to speak with you. I told him it was too soon, that today has been overwhelming enough without further emotional complications. Eleanor is silent for a long moment. You're right. I'm not ready, Father. I understand. But consider this. 2 years were stolen from you both. Do you wish to lose more time to George Montgomery's schemes? He leaves her to her thoughts. The camera lingers on Eleanor's profile as she stares into the flames, her expression thoughtful. The grandfather clock in the corner strikes 10, its resonant chimes marking the passage of time that can never be reclaimed. Another knock at the door interrupts her reverie. This time it's Sarah, who enters without waiting for permission. She has changed from her formal attire into a simpler evening dress, her hair loosened from its elaborate style. James is leaving, her cousin says without preamble. His carriage is being prepared now. He says he understands if you don't wish to see him, but he couldn't go without at least trying. Eleanor closes her eyes briefly, weighing her options, considering the wisdom of confronting yet another emotional challenge on this already tumultuous day. Where is he? In the garden. By the rose arbor. Sarah moves to her cousin's side, gently touching the elaborate wedding gown. You can't meet him looking like this, Ellie. It's too laden with today's events. Let me help you change. Eleanor nods in agreement. You're right. I can't face him looking like a bride. Not today's bride, at any rate. A short time later, Eleanor walks through the garden, now wearing a simple blue dress of soft wool, practical and unadorned, as far from bridal as possible. The evening air is cool after the rain, and she wraps a cashmere shawl around her shoulders. Lanterns have been lit along the garden paths, their golden light reflecting in puddles left by the recent shower. The rose arbor is illuminated by the light of a full moon that has emerged from behind the clouds, casting dappled shadows on the path. James stands with his back to her, looking up at the stars that have appeared as the storm clouds dissipate. His posture is tense, his hands clasped behind his back in an attitude of restraint. He turns at the sound of her footsteps on the gravel path. Eleanor. Just her name, spoken softly, filled with 2 years of regret and longing. You're leaving? She asks, stopping a few feet away from him. The distance between them seems both too great and not great enough, a physical manifestation of their emotional situation. I thought it best. Today has been overwhelming for you. He takes in her changed appearance, his eyes softening at this visible evidence that she has shed her bridal identity. I didn't want to impose further, for all of us. She moves to stand beside him, looking up at the same stars. Their familiar constellations a reminder of evenings they once spent together in this same garden, planning a future that had been stolen from them. Why did you believe that letter, James? Why didn't you come to me directly? 2 years ago, when you received it. He sighs heavily, the sound weighted with self-recrimination. Pride, I suppose, and fear. The letter contained details of conversations we'd had in private, things only you and I should have known. It described the book of poetry I'd given you, quoted lines I'd marked for your attention. It mentioned the picnic by the lake, where I first told you I loved you. Details so intimate I couldn't imagine how anyone else could know them. Sarah knew, Eleanor says softly. My mother knew. Even Agnes might have overheard our conversations. There were many possibilities besides the one you chose to believe, that I had betrayed your confidence, betrayed your trust. Yes, he agrees simply. I should have considered those possibilities, should have questioned, investigated. Instead, I reacted in haste and pain. It's my greatest regret. They stand in silence for a moment, the weight of 2 lost years hanging between them like an invisible barrier. The roses around them have largely finished blooming for the season, but a few late blossoms still scent the air with their perfume. What will you do now? James finally asks, careful to keep his tone neutral, free of expectation or demand. I don't know. Father is working to have the marriage invalidated. The judge is confident it can be done discreetly, given the circumstances. After that, she shrugs, the movement causing her shawl to slip slightly. Begin again, I suppose. Alone. The question hangs between them, simple but freighted with meaning. Eleanor turns to look at him directly, her face illuminated by moonlight and the distant glow of the garden lanterns. In this light, she looks younger, more like the woman he remembered during his exile. That depends. Her voice is steady, but there's a vulnerability in her eyes that she allows him to see. On what? James takes a half step closer, close enough that he could reach for her hand if he dared. On whether you've learned to trust me. On whether I can trust you not to leave at the first sign of trouble. She holds his gaze unflinchingly. On whether what we once had can be rebuilt after such damage. James takes another step toward her, hesitant but determined. I've learned my lesson, Eleanor, the hard way. These past 2 years in Europe were empty without you. I threw myself into business, into society, into anything that might help me forget. Nothing worked. You were always there, in every beautiful view, every piece of music, every poem I tried to read. And yet you never wrote, never inquired after me. I thought you had chosen another. The letter said, I know what it said. Eleanor interrupts gently. But that's my point, James. You believed what a letter said over what you knew of my character, my heart. That's not easily forgotten. I don't ask for easy forgiveness, James says, only for the chance to earn your trust again. We're not the same people we were 2 years ago, Eleanor. Too much has happened. I've grown wiser, I hope, less hasty in judgment, more careful with what's precious. And I've grown stronger, she replies, less willing to let others determine my fate, less patient with deception. A small smile touches James's lips. I saw that today. Your orchestration of the confrontation was formidable. A faint blush colors Eleanor's cheeks. The missing chair was perhaps theatrical, but effective. I wanted to signal my intentions from the beginning, to let them know that I was not the naive, compliant bride they believed me to be. It was brilliant, James says with admiration. The moment I saw it, I knew something significant was about to happen, though I couldn't have guessed the full extent of the revelation. Their conversation is interrupted by the distant sound of carriage wheels on gravel. From their position in the garden, they can see the Montgomery carriage departing, luggage strapped to its roof, lanterns swinging as it rounds the curve of the drive. Eleanor watches it disappear into the night, a chapter of her life closing with its departure. They're gone, she says softly, and good riddance. James's voice carries an edge of anger. What George Montgomery did is done, Eleanor finishes for him, and dwelling on it serves no purpose. I prefer to look forward now. James studies her face in the moonlight. May I be part of that forward view? Instead of answering directly, Eleanor extends her hand to him, a simple gesture that bridges the physical gap between them. Perhaps we should get to know each other again, properly this time, without interference from outside forces. James takes her offered hand, his touch gentle but firm. I would like that very much. A small smile touches her lips, the first genuine smile of this long and tumultuous day. As would I. He offers his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she takes it. Together they walk through the moonlit garden, talking softly, beginning the long process of rebuilding what was broken. Their path takes them past beds of late-blooming flowers around the ornamental pond where water lilies float in silent splendor, and finally back toward the house where lights still burn in several windows despite the late hour. Back in the manor, the dining room has been cleared, the 11 chairs pushed back into place around the empty table. Mrs. Porter oversees the final cleaning, ensuring everything is in order despite the abrupt and dramatic end to the reception. She directs a footman to sweep up the last fragments of the shattered crystal glass, tangible evidence of the moment when truth shattered pretense. A strange day, she murmurs to herself, adjusting one of the chairs with a practiced hand. Strange indeed. Lily, the young maid, nods in agreement as she polishes the silverware before it's returned to storage. Miss Eleanor knew all along, didn't she? That's why she insisted on 11 chairs. It wasn't a mistake at all. Miss Eleanor has always been clever, Mrs. Porter replies with a hint of pride. Too clever for the likes of the Montgomerys, if you ask me. Always plotting and scheming, that family. Not genuine quality, for all their fine name. Do you think she'll marry Mr. Edwards now? Lily asks, her youthful face alight with romantic speculation. They did look well together in the garden just now. I saw them from the upstairs window when I was turning down the beds. Mrs. Porter gives her a stern look. It's not our place to discuss the family's private affairs, Lily, and you shouldn't be spying on Miss Eleanor. I wasn't spying, Mrs. Porter. Just happened to glance out the window, I did. Lily's protest is earnest but unconvincing. The housekeeper's skepticism is evident, but she doesn't pursue the matter. Well, whatever happens, it's for Miss Eleanor to decide. And after today, I think we can all agree she's quite capable of making her own decisions. As they leave the dining room, Mrs. Porter glances back one last time. In the moonlight streaming through the tall windows, The 11 empty chairs cast long shadows across the polished floor. Like silent witnesses to the day's events, they stand guard over secrets revealed and futures altered by their very arrangement. The single missing chair, the 12th that was never set, has proven more powerful in its absence than it ever could have been in its presence. The camera pans slowly across the empty dining room, lingering on the 11 chairs before beginning a gradual pullback. As it does, we see more of the manor house, the grand staircase, the portrait gallery with generations of Harringtons looking down from gilt frames, the entrance hall with its black and white marble tiles. Further still, until we're viewing Elmwood Manor from outside, its windows glowing with lamplight against the night sky, the moon casting its serene light over the scene. The narrator's voice returns, soft and contemplative. A wedding day in September 1892. 12 guests, 11 chairs. A message hidden in plain sight, waiting to be understood. At Elmwood Manor, they still speak of that day, of the bride who knew the truth before she spoke her vows, of the missing chair that foretold a departure, of a love lost and found again in the shadow of deception. The image dissolves to show the manor 1 year later. The seasons have changed. Autumn leaves now carpet the lawn where white chairs once stood for a wedding ceremony. Through a window, we glimpse Eleanor in the library, seated beside James. They are reading together, their heads bent close over a book, the easy intimacy of their posture suggesting the restoration of their relationship. On Eleanor's left hand, a new ring catches the light. Not the Montgomery wedding band, but a different one, chosen with love rather than calculation. The marriage to Thomas Montgomery was indeed invalidated. The narrator continues. The evidence of George Montgomery's deception proved compelling to the court. The scandal was considerable but brief. Society soon found new subjects for its gossip. Eleanor and James were married the following spring, in a small ceremony attended only by those closest to them. This time, there were precisely as many chairs as guests. The camera returns to the weathered photograph we saw at the beginning. This time, we notice something we missed before. Eleanor's expression, barely perceptible beneath her veil, is not one of bridal happiness but of grim determination. And in the background, partially obscured by other figures, James Edwards stands watching, his invitation to the ceremony part of Eleanor's carefully orchestrated plan. The image transitions to a new photograph, this one showing Eleanor and James on their wedding day, surrounded by a small group of genuinely smiling guests. The contrast between the two images is striking. One, a formal portrait masking deception and calculation. The other, a candid moment capturing authentic joy. The Montgomerys left the county soon after, their finances in disarray, their social standing diminished by the scandal. George Montgomery never admitted his wrongdoing publicly, taking his secrets with him to the grave 5 years later. Thomas eventually married the daughter of a wealthy merchant in London, a match without pretense or deception, and by all accounts, a happier one than his first attempt. We see a final image of Elmwood Manor in later years, children playing on its lawns, Eleanor and James's family, a new generation untainted by the machinations that had nearly derailed their parents' happiness. Sometimes, the narrator concludes, it is not what is present that tells the true story, but what is absent. A single empty chair can speak volumes, if only we are willing to listen. At Elmwood Manor in September 1892, 11 chairs were set for 12 guests, a deliberate discrepancy that would expose a conspiracy, end a fraudulent marriage, and ultimately, restore a love that had been wrongfully interrupted. The camera pulls back one final time, showing Elmwood Manor from a distance, a stately home against the backdrop of rolling English countryside, before slowly fading to black. In the years that followed, whenever Eleanor was asked about that fateful day, she would smile and say only this, I merely set the table for the truth to be served. As the screen fades to black completely, we hear the echo of footsteps walking away, and then silence. End.